My friends, I want to begin tonight with a truth most people never hear and even fewer ever accept. And it's this: motivation is a visitor, discipline is a resident. Motivation shows up when it wants to, usually on the good days, when the sun is shining, when the mood is right. But discipline is the neighbor who doesn't miss a day. Discipline shows up whether you feel like it or not. And that, my friends, is why so many people struggle with consistency. They're waiting for the visitor instead of building a relationship with the resident. They're waiting for inspiration to strike instead of building a structure that works even on the days when inspiration is nowhere to be found. Let me ask you something. How many times have you started strong because you felt motivated? How many times have you made the promise, bought the planner, set the goal, and then a week later, the motivation faded and the habit disappeared? See, the problem isn't the desire. The problem is the design. Most people build their life on emotion, not on systems. And emotions, as you know, are a poor foundation for anything meant to last. Now tonight, I want to give you something different. Not hype, not the quick fix, a method, a system, a ledger. You see, I learned a long time ago that life works just like a ledger, just like accounting. Every day you're making deposits or withdrawals. Every habit, every choice, every action adds or subtracts. And if you want consistency, you don't wait for the muse, you manage the ledger. So I want to show you what I call the audit and action method, a simple little process that doesn't depend on feeling good or being inspired. It depends on clarity. It depends on responsibility. It depends on the kind of structure that builds consistency even on the hard days. There are 3 parts to it. First, the audit, because you can't fix what you can't see. Second, the adjustment, replacing the daily debits with daily deposits. And third, the accumulation, the compounding power that turns little disciplines into major breakthroughs. And I promise you this, if you follow these steps, you'll finally discover how to stay consistent without motivation. Because your life will no longer be governed by mood, it'll be governed by method. Let's begin. Now let's talk about why consistency falls apart, not in theory, but in real life, in your life, in my life, in the lives of almost everybody you know. And it's not because people lack talent. It's not because they lack intelligence. It's not even because they lack desire. Most people fail at consistency because they never notice the invisible debits quietly draining their progress. See, we all understand big mistakes. Big failures are obvious. If you miss a deadline by a mile, you know it. If you quit your job on impulse and regret it the next day, that's clear. But it's not the big things that usually rob us of consistency. It's the little things, the small losses, the subtle withdrawals, the habits so tiny you don't even bother to record them, but the ledger records them anyway. Procrastination, for example. It never feels dramatic. It's just, I'll do it tomorrow. One delay, one small push into the future. But every time you say tomorrow, you're making a withdrawal. And before long, your habit account is overdrawn, not because of one catastrophic decision, but because of hundreds of tiny postponements. Or think about distraction. 5 minutes scrolling, 10 minutes wandering, a little detour here and there. You think it's nothing. Just a quick check, you tell yourself. But friends, the ledger is always counting, and the little debits quietly add up. Or let's talk about emotional excuses. This is a big one. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I'm just not feeling it today. These stories feel so reasonable, so understandable, that you hardly recognize them as losses, but the ledger recognizes them, because life measures actions, not intentions. And the truth is, most people never stop to identify these small leaks. They only look at the big outcome. I'm not improving. I'm not getting results. I'm not making progress. But outcomes are just summaries of all the tiny entries behind the scenes. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a business that loses $2 here, $3 there, $5 somewhere else, nothing big enough to panic about, nothing loud, nothing urgent, but month after month, the losses grow. And eventually the business wonders, where did the money go? Too late, they never tracked the debits. That's what happens to most people's consistency. Consistency doesn't collapse with a crash. It erodes with neglect. And here's the most dangerous part. You don't feel the loss right away. You don't pay the price today. You don't even notice the difference tomorrow. But down the line, 6 months, a year, you look back and realize you've drifted far from where you meant to be. Not because you made one big wrong turn, but because you allowed the small ones. So the first step to staying consistent is simple. You must become aware of the invisible debits. Because until you see the leaks, you cannot stop them. And until you stop them, you will never build momentum. And that, my friends, is why the next step is so important. The moment of truth, the moment when everything begins to turn around. Let's go there next. Now, my friends, every transformation, every real one begins with a moment I call the turning point. And it usually doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't show up on a calendar marked with a star. No, the turning point comes quietly, softly, sometimes in the middle of an ordinary day. It's that moment when you finally look at your results, your health, your income, your habits, your progress, and you say to yourself, something's not adding up. You look at your life's ledger and you realize you've been making withdrawals without even knowing it. You realize you've been overdrafting your own potential, not because you're a failure, but because you haven't been paying attention. And let me tell you something important. This moment is not a moment of shame. This is a moment of power. It takes courage to look at the facts, courage to admit what hasn't been working, courage to face the truth without reaching for an excuse. Most people never get there. They blame the circumstances, blame the weather, blame the boss, blame the economy. But the turning point comes the moment you say, no more blaming. Let me see the numbers. Let me see my part. It reminds me of a business owner I once knew. Every quarter, she would gather her papers, sit at her desk, and say, all right, let's see how we really did. She didn't look at the books emotionally. She looked at them honestly, because she understood something most people never learn. You cannot improve what you will not examine. And life works the same way. You can't guess your way to success. You can't hope your way into better habits. You can't drift into discipline. You must decide. And that decision begins when you take inventory, when you take out the ledger and say, let me see the truth. The truth might sting for a moment. It often does. You might see weeks of inconsistent effort, months of drifting, a few too many skipped days, a few too many excuses written between the lines. But don't mistake discomfort for failure. Discomfort is feedback. And feedback is gold because it gives you the power to change. Most people never reach the turning point because they're afraid of what they'll see. They think if they avoid checking the ledger, maybe the debts won't show up. But life does not allow you to skip the audit. Life is always keeping score. The question is, are you willing to look? And let me tell you, once you do, something remarkable happens. The fog lifts. The patterns become clear. You begin to see exactly where the leaks are, where the little debits have been draining your capacity. And suddenly, you're no longer guessing. You're no longer hoping. You're in the driver's seat. That's the turning point. Not emotion, not guilt, not blame, clarity. You look at the ledger and say, I see where I'm losing. I see where I'm winning. And now I can change the balance. Once you've reached that moment of clarity, once you've accepted the truth of your own ledger, you are ready for the real work. And that brings us to the first step of the method, the audit. So now that we've reached the turning point, the moment of clarity, the next step, my friends, is the audit. And let me tell you, this is where the real change begins. Not in the grand plans, not in the emotional promises, but in the simple, steady act of looking honestly at where you stand. Because before you can build a new life, you must understand the one you already have. The audit is simple. Not easy, but simple. It begins with one question. What exactly is holding me back? Not in theory, not in imagination, but in practice in the actual hours and habits of your day. So I want you to take out a notebook, a journal, a sheet of paper, anything. And at the top, write this phrase, deposits and debits. And under that, you'll create 3 categories, the same 3 I've used for years, and the same ones I teach again and again, because they tell the whole story of a person's progress. 1, your habits, the daily actions. the small routines, the things you do automatically. Ask yourself, which habits add to my balance? Which habits quietly subtract from it? If you read 10 minutes a day, deposit. If you scroll for 40 minutes without noticing, debit. If you exercise, even lightly, deposit. If you say, I'll do it tomorrow for the third day in a row, debit. Your habits tell the truth about your future long before your results do. 2. Your environment, where you spend your time, who you listen to, what you expose your mind to. Ask yourself, does my environment support my goals or sabotage them? Does it make the right choice easier or harder? If your desk is a mess, that's a debit. If your kitchen is stocked with better choices, that's a deposit. If your phone is within reach every second of the day, debit. If your workspace invites focus and clarity, deposit. Environment is stronger than willpower. If the environment stays the same, so will you. 3. Your associations. Now this one, my friends, might be the most important of all. Ask yourself, who influences my thinking? Who shapes my standards? Are these people deposits or debits in my life? Some people lift you. Some people drain you. Some people challenge you to grow. Some people compete with your potential. Jim Rohn's rule still stands. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and the audit will reveal exactly how true that is. Now, once you've identified these 3 areas, here's what I want you to do next. Pick your top 5 debits, not 50, not 20, just 5. Because if you try to fix everything, you fix nothing. But if you fix 5 major leaks, the whole ship rises. And when you see those 5 debits on paper, something powerful happens. The excuses begin to fall away. The patterns become undeniable. You start to understand that inconsistency is not a mystery, it's a math problem. A matter of too many withdrawals and not enough deposits. And once you see the numbers, you can change them. Because the audit isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. And clarity is the beginning of control. Now that we've done the audit, now that the truth is on the table, we can move to the next part. Adjustment. Replacing the debits with deposits, shifting the direction of your days, rebuilding the ledger one small entry at a time. That's where transformation starts to take shape. Now, my friends, once the audit is complete, once the truth is clear and the debits are staring back at you, the next step is what I call the adjustment. And let me tell you something important. This is not about changing your entire life in one dramatic burst of enthusiasm. No. If you try to overhaul everything at once, you will burn out just as quickly as you started. Real change doesn't begin with the mountain. Real change begins with the pebble. You don't transform your life overnight. You transform your life little by little by replacing the daily debits with daily deposits. The smallest deposits, consistently made, carry more power than the grand gestures made once a year. Let me show you how this works. You start with the top 5 debits you uncovered in your audit. Those are your 5 leaks, the holes in your bucket. And instead of trying to patch the entire bucket at once, you begin with one hole, then another and another. Steady, deliberate, intentional. So take the first debit and ask this question. What is one tiny deposit I can replace it with? Just one, not 10. Not 5. 1. If your debit is hitting the snooze button 3 times, your tiny deposit might be 2 days this week. I get up on the first alarm. Not 7 days. Not perfection. Just 2. That's enough to start shifting the pattern. If your debit is scrolling endlessly through your phone, your tiny deposit might be, before I checked my phone, I read 1 page of a book. 1 page. Not a chapter. 1 page. And over time, the ledger begins to tilt. If your debit is skipping workouts, your deposit might be a 10-minute walk every evening. Not a marathon, just a walk. Because consistency is not built at the gym, it's built in your mind. The goal is simple. Make the deposits easy. Make the debits inconvenient. That's called environment design. And it works better than willpower ever will. If you want to save money, stop leaving the shopping apps on the front page of your phone. If you want to study more, keep the book on your pillow. If you want to drink more water, Put the glass where you can't miss it. Small changes in your environment create big changes in your behavior because you can't depend on motivation, but you can depend on structure. Now, let's talk about the 4 types of deposits that make the biggest difference. I call these the essential accounts, the same categories I've used for decades, because they shape every part of your future. 1. Health deposits. Move your body. Drink water. Sleep with purpose. A strong body supports a strong mind, and a strong mind supports strong discipline. 2. Learning deposits. Read a few pages. Listen to something that stretches your mind. Engage with ideas that elevate your thinking. Education is a deposit that pays interest forever. 3. Wealth deposits. Save a little. Budget a little. Plan a little. Financial discipline is consistency in its purest form. 4. Character deposits. Keep your word. Show kindness. Finish what you start. Your character is the account that influences every other account you have. Now here's the key. You don't need giant deposits in each category. You just need small daily deposits that compound over time. And as you begin these adjustments, you'll notice something amazing. The old debits lose their power. The excuses get quieter. The temptations become weaker. Because every time you make the right choice, every time you follow through, you strengthen the muscle of discipline. The adjustment is not dramatic. The adjustment is deliberate. The adjustment is the steady hand that begins to turn your life in a new direction. And once these deposits begin to stack, once the ledger begins to show progress, you will feel something powerful rising inside you, momentum. That brings us to the next stage. The miracle of accumulation, the secret force that turns small disciplines into extraordinary results. Now, my friends, once you've made the audit, once you've begun the adjustments, something extraordinary begins to happen quietly, almost invisibly at first. It's a force so powerful that most people underestimate it their entire lives. But if you learn to harness it, it will transform everything you touch. That force is called accumulation. Accumulation is the slow miracle that rewards the disciplined and punishes the careless. It's neutral, it doesn't take sides, it simply multiplies whatever you feed it. If you feed it procrastination, it will multiply delay. If you feed it discipline, it will multiply progress. If you feed it excuses, you'll accumulate regret. If you feed it small daily deposits, you'll accumulate strength, wisdom, wealth, confidence. Accumulation doesn't care what you want. It only cares what you consistently do. Let me tell you why most people never experience this power. Because the beginning feels too small, too slow, too insignificant to matter. A 5-minute walk doesn't feel like health. 10 pages of reading don't feel like education. Putting away $10 doesn't feel like wealth. Keeping one small promise doesn't feel like character. But that's the illusion. And it's the reason people quit before the magic happens. The first days of consistency feel like nothing. The first week feels like almost nothing. But friends, accumulation is working even when you don't see it. Think of a snowball rolling down a hill. At the top, it's small, barely worth noticing. But with each rotation, each flake, each tiny addition, it grows. And soon, it's building momentum faster, bigger, heavier than anything it started as. Your habits work the same way. Every deposit is a flake on the snowball. Every repetition is a turn of the wheel. Every day you show up, even a little, you accelerate the slope, and then one day after weeks or months or even years, the people around you say, "Wow, that happened so fast, you changed overnight." But you and I know better. You know that nothing happens overnight. It only looks that way to those who never saw the small deposits. Let me give you a simple example. Read 10 pages a day. Just 10. In 1 year, that's roughly a dozen books. In 5 years, that's 60 books. In a decade, you become the most educated person in almost any room, and all you ever did was read 10 pages a day. That's accumulation. Quiet at first, unstoppable later. Or think about money. Save a little each paycheck. Invest a little every month. One day you look up and wonder how the account grew so large. It wasn't a miracle. It was mathematics. Tiny deposits repeated long enough to bring the interest. Or think about discipline. Hold yourself to small promises. Don't skip the basics. Do the hard things in small portions. And over time, you become someone others respect, trust, follow. Character accumulates. Reputation accumulates. And this is why step 3 accumulation is the engine of consistency. Because consistency isn't built on excitement. It's built on momentum. And momentum comes from many days when the action was small, but the discipline was large. Let me give you a final truth about accumulation. It works whether you participate or not. If you're not accumulating progress, you're accumulating neglect. If you're not compounding discipline, you're compounding excuses. If you're not building your future, you're building your regret. There is no neutral. There is no pause. Life is always adding, always subtracting, always compounding something. The question is, what are you allowing to accumulate? Because if you choose your deposits wisely, if you give them time, if you stay steady long enough, accumulation becomes your greatest ally. And soon, what once felt difficult becomes natural. What once felt heavy becomes light. And what once felt impossible becomes inevitable. That is the miracle of consistency. Not in the first step, not in the second, but in the compounding of all those tiny steps that finally create a life you're proud to live. And now, with the audit done, the adjustments in place, and the power of accumulation at work, we must prepare for the part of the journey most people underestimate: how to stay consistent when life gets hard. Now, my friends, if every day were sunny, if every morning were easy, if every season of life flowed without resistance, well, then consistency wouldn't be a challenge at all. Anybody can be disciplined on the good days. Anybody can follow a plan when the wind is at their back. But the real test, the true test, comes when life gets heavy, when the schedule gets tight, when the emotions dip, when the unexpected arrives, uninvited and inconvenient. That's when most people lose their consistency, not because they lack desire, but because they never prepared for difficulty. They built a plan for the good days, not a system for the hard days. So let me give you one of the most important principles I ever learned. If you want to stay consistent, you must build what I call rescue habits. Rescue habits are the tiny, simple, non-negotiable actions you perform even on your worst days. And the reason they matter is this. Successful people don't avoid the hard days, they prepare for them. Let's talk about it. When life gets tough, you don't need the perfect routine. You don't need the full workout. You don't need the hour of study or the flawless schedule. What you need is a minimum standard that keeps your momentum alive. Let me give you some examples of rescue habits. A 10-minute walk when you can't do a full workout. 5 pages of reading when you don't have time for a chapter. 1 line in your journal when your mind is tired. 2 minutes reviewing your goals when the day has gone sideways. These may seem insignificant, but they are lifesavers in disguise. Because rescue habits protect the most important part of consistency, your identity. You're not just doing the habit, you're keeping the story alive. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who honors my commitments. I am someone who deposits even when it's hard. See, the danger is not missing the big routine. The danger is breaking the chain. Because once the chain breaks, the mind starts offering excuses. I'll skip today and maybe tomorrow. I'll restart next week. I'll wait for a better time. And soon, the ledger is filled with small debits that drag you backward. So here's the rule I want you to remember. Never miss twice. Miss once if you must. Life happens, but never twice, not in a row. 1 miss is human. 2 misses is habit. And habits, as you know, determine the balance of your life. Let me give you another rescue principle. Lower the bar, but never close the book. If you can't do 30 minutes, do 3. If you can't study the whole chapter, study the summary. If you can't meditate for 10 minutes, close your eyes for 60 seconds. The point is not the size of the deposit, it's the act of making it. Because when you deposit on the hard days, you build something more valuable than progress. You build resilience And resilience, my friends, is worth more than any shortcut, any hack, any burst of motivation you'll ever find. Resilience is the quiet confidence that says, I can keep going even when it's not perfect. I can keep moving even when it's not easy. I can stay consistent even when life is inconsistent. This is why I tell people, your rescue habits are the lifelines that keep your future alive. They catch you when discipline slips. They steady you when emotions fluctuate. They protect your momentum when life throws you off balance. And here's the best part. The more you practice rescue habits, the less rescuing you need. The safety net becomes a trampoline. Your bounce back time shrinks. Your consistency strengthens. Your confidence grows. And soon, you're living a life where setbacks don't derail you. They just remind you how strong your foundation has become. Now, once you've built these rescue habits, you are ready for the system that ensures consistency, not just for a week, not just for a season, but for a lifetime. The monthly audit. Now, my friends, if you truly want consistency to last, not for a week, not for a challenge, not until the excitement wears off, but for the rest of your life, then you must build a structure that keeps you aligned, accountable, and aware. And that structure is what I call the monthly audit. The monthly audit is not a punishment. It's not a test. It's not a moment to beat yourself up. It is a moment to see clearly. Just like a business owner reviews the books at the end of each month, you must review the books of your own life. Because if you never pause to evaluate, you'll drift. And if you drift long enough, you'll wake up one day far from where you meant to be, not because you failed, but because you never checked the map. So once a month, pick a date, circle it on your calendar, you sit down as the CEO of your own future. Not as the employee, not as the bystander, as the CEO. You open your notebook, your ledger, your journal, and you review the last 30 days with honesty and curiosity. And here are the questions I want you to ask, simple but powerful. 1. What were my top deposits this month? What did you do well? Where did you show discipline? Which habits gained strength? Remember, my friends, acknowledging your progress is a deposit too. 2. What were my top debits? Be honest. Where did you slip? Where did you drift? What excuses kept showing up? But listen carefully. This is not about guilt. Debits are not failures. They are feedback. And 3. Where did I grow? Maybe you improved your discipline. Maybe you managed your time better. Maybe you kept a promise to yourself. These small points of growth compound in ways you cannot imagine. 4. Where did I drift? There is no shame in drifting. Everyone drifts. But only disciplined people notice and correct it early. 5. Which habits are compounding? Which ones are costing me? This question will change your life if you're willing to answer it honestly. Some habits produce interest, energy, improvement, clarity. Others quietly charge you stress, delay, regret. 6. What one adjustment can I make for the next 30 days? Not 10, not 5, 1. Because profound change is built on simple decisions, repeated consistently. Now, let me tell you why this monthly audit is so powerful. First, it keeps you honest. When you write things down, the truth becomes undeniable. You can't hide from your own handwriting. Second, it keeps you aware. Awareness is the greatest force for change. When you see the pattern begins to change. Third, it keeps you aligned. Life pulls you in 1,000 directions. A monthly audit pulls you back to yourself. And perhaps most importantly, the monthly audit gives you perspective. You stop judging your life day by day, which can be deceiving, and instead you see the arc, the direction, the trajectory. And trajectory, my friends, is far more important than speed. As long as your ledger is trending upward over weeks and months, as long as the deposits are growing stronger, as long as the debits are shrinking in frequency, you are on your way. Consistency is not built from perfect days. Consistency is built from honest months. And with the monthly audit in place, with your eyes open, your habits aligned, your deposits intentional, there's only one thing left to do. Step fully into the life you are creating. And that brings us to our final step, the closing reminder, the call to action. And now, my friends, we arrive at the final piece of this journey, the moment where knowledge must become action, and action must become your new way of living. Because after you've looked at the ledger, after you've done the audit, after you've made the adjustments and understood the power of accumulation, after you've prepared for the hard days and committed to the monthly and review, there is only one question left. What deposit will you make today? Not tomorrow, not next week, not when the stars align, or the mood is right, or motivation strikes again. Today, because your life will not change when you feel ready. Your life will change when you begin. Let me tell you something important as we close. Consistency is not built on emotion, it's built on decisions. Small decisions. Quiet decisions. The kind you make when no one is watching. And here's the wonderful secret. You don't need a perfect plan to begin. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to feel strong or inspired or confident. You just need one deposit. One small action that moves your ledger in the right direction. One small step that says, I'm taking responsibility for my life. One tiny discipline that becomes the first of many. Remember, your future is not created by your big efforts. It's created by your daily entries. Your character grows one decision at a time. Your health grows one choice at a time. Your finances grow $1 at a time. Your confidence grows one promise kept at a time. And when you look back months from now, years from now, you will see something remarkable. You will realize that the greatest transformation of your life didn't come from some dramatic moment. It came from the daily deposits, the small disciplines, the quiet victories. Because that's the truth of the ledger. It keeps perfect score, and the balance always tells the story. So tonight, before you go to bed, ask yourself these questions. What deposit did I make today? Where did I show discipline? Where did I invest in my growth? Where did I create a little more of the future I want? And if today wasn't the day you hoped for, don't worry. The ledger is opened again tomorrow. Brand new, fresh, ready for a new entry. My friends, your life is waiting. Your potential is waiting. Your future balance, your surplus of strength, wisdom, character, and success is waiting. All it asks is that you begin with one decision, one deposit, one small act of discipline. Because once you begin, the best is yet to come.